And welcome all. Congressman Vindman, go ahead.
Thank you, Amanda. First of all, let me thank everyone for being here tonight. We have over 200 people that are listening to this Zoom, and I know there's a great deal of concern and fear about what is going on with your jobs. And I feel that personally. My wife is a federal government employee, and so I'm a 25-year Army veteran. I have practiced some labor and employment law, but you're not going to listen to me as an expert. I actually have true experts here tonight to help answer some of your questions. And they're focused squarely on this buyout and air quotes offer, and then the return to work. And with that, again, good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. It's always an honor to meet with hardworking public servants who keep our government running. I want to start by recognizing the incredible work you do every single day, often under difficult and uncertain circumstances. You deserve respect, stability, and a voice in the policies that shape your work and your future. We're here tonight because we know many of you have real concerns about what's happening in Washington, about the future of federal employment, proposed cuts that could impact your jobs, and convoluted so-called government efficiency efforts. We've seen troubling signals, including illegal buyout offers, hiring freezes, and the federal return to in-person work mandate. I want you to know that I hear you and I share your concerns. Before we dive in, I want to take a moment to thank our panelists, Rob Shriver and Scott Robinson, for joining us tonight. Each of them brings valuable experience and insight, and I appreciate them taking the time to be part of this conversation. They'll be sharing their perspectives, but most importantly, they're here to listen to you and help you address your concerns. These conversations are how we fight for solutions that will work for you. I also want to be clear that this won't be the last opportunity to have these discussions. I'll be holding more town halls and forums on a range of issues that impact our communities, but tonight our focus is on you, the federal workforce, and the policies that shape your careers and livelihoods. So thank you for taking the time to and being here, and for sharing your experience, and for staying engaged. Let's get started. With no further ado, I'm going to introduce and give you a quick bio of Rob Shriver. I'm thrilled that we could have him join us here tonight. Rob is a former director of the Office of Personnel Management and current managing director for Democracy Forward. As a former OPM acting director, Rob served as a champion for the federal workforce, ensuring that OPM supports employees from hire to retire. He has a long history of leadership, policy, and program development and operations. Rob was confirmed by the Senate on a bipartisan vote to be OPM's deputy director on December 2022. He previously served as OPM, served at the OPM during the Obama administration, where he expanded equality for LGBTQ federal employees, improved federal labor relations, implemented major provisions for Affordable Care Act. Outside of OPM, Mr. Shriver has worked in state government and private sector IT. He began his career as a lawyer at the National Treasury Employees Union. Rob is a graduate of Virginia Tech and Washington University Law School. Rob, over to you.
Thank you so much, Congressman. It's really my honor to be here with you tonight. Thank you for your leadership on behalf of federal employees in Virginia and all over the country. As you mentioned, I'm coming fresh out of OPM after 4 years there during the Biden administration, including the last 8 months as the acting director, and I'm pretty horrified with what I've seen coming out of my agency, and pretty horrified with what I'm hearing about how the career civil servants in that agency are being treated. And I know that that is happening all across the government. I wanted to just briefly touch on a few key highlights. Number one is it's clear that there is a strategy from this administration to drive out as many career civil servants as they possibly can. And we're seeing this through multiple different initiatives, whether it is targeting prosecutors and FBI agents who worked on cases involving the president or January 6th, whether it is an incredibly broad sweep up of people under this anti-DEI initiative to include not only people who work on DEI, but people who used to work on DEI, people who went to DEI trainings or were on as collateral duties, DEI councils, whether it's the newer, more far-reaching version of Schedule F that's been implemented. It's intended to turn broad swaths of the federal workforce into more political type appointments. The Congressman mentioned the one size fits all return, I'd say, to the 1990s with a 5-day in the office policy for federal workers. Telework really got a big boost in the early 2000s from Republican Congressman Frank Wolf from Virginia. So telework in the federal government has been a bipartisan issue for a long time. And, I think the data shows that federal employees are working as much in the office as the private sector is. In fact, over half the government is ineligible for telework and works in the office every day. And so just, I think this is just yet one more policy that's intended to make it difficult on feds and convince them to voluntarily, resign. And so on that point, of course, there is the hot topic of the past week and a half or so, which is this fork in the road deferred resignation program. I want you to know that Democracy Forward, in partnership with AFGE and other union clients, has gone to court over this fork in the road initiative. And we've asked the court to send OPM back to the drawing board because there are just too many questions about whether this is a legit deal, the legal underpinnings of it, federal employees' abilities to hold the agencies to the deal. And I recognize that these are personal decisions for every federal employee about whether to take a deal like that or not. And I would just say that we got a whole lot of concerns about that. And that's why we went to court to try to get OPM to go back to the drawing board and come back with better information for federal employees about this deal, especially when there are statutory tools that are available that agencies can use for this kind of thing. You guys know there's a voluntary early retirement program. There is an incentive payment program to try and incentivize federal employees to resign if the agency wants to do some workforce reshaping. And so my question all along has been, why aren't those the programs that Elon Musk and company are using? Why are they making up something brand new where federal employees don't have any rights and there aren't any rules around it? And I think the answer is because they want to have as much flexibility as possible to not live up to their end of the deal. So those are the things I wanted to highlight. I also, Congressman, wanted to thank you for your leadership on introducing legislation to protect military spouses from the 5 days in the office requirements. Under the Biden-Harris administration, we adopted a whole strategy for military connected families, and we expanded the military spouse hiring authority because military spouses have so much to offer federal agencies, and having those remote work opportunities so that they don't have to change jobs when their spouse gets their orders to go out on deployment has just been huge for taking advantage of military spouses and the talent that they bring, getting them into government. So just wanted to thank you, Congressman, for your leadership in introducing that legislation. And with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Scott Robinson, the president of AFGE Local 448, representing TSA workers in Virginia. Scott, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Shriver. Good evening to all of our attendees. Again, my name is Scott Robinson. I have over 20 years of experience with the federal government and have served as the local president for the American Federation of Government Employees for just about 10 years now. Our local does represent the TSA officers within the Commonwealth of Virginia. Now, I mean, I do have to say that TSA has not yet been explicitly targeted by the recently flurry of executive orders. But we understand that by standing in solidarity with our brothers and sisters at other federal agencies, we can stand strong against any attack to the dedicated, career-minded citizens that make up our federal workforce. It is understood that many workers are confused, afraid, as well as angry, and that is why TSA is leading the way and representing the interests of federal workers during this trying period. AFGE is the largest federal labor union, representing over 800,000 federal workers. That's workers at TSA, at USAID, the Defense Department, the Department of Education, the VA, and 65 other federal agencies. So it may go without saying, but federal workers are essential to the functioning of the U.S. government. Federal workers provide efficient and frugal services, on average being paid 25% less than their counterparts in the federal sector, or I'm sorry, the private sector. Approximately 30% of our federal workers are military veterans. So the federal workforce is not made up of men in gray, as I think is trying to be presented, but it's members of our everyday communities. Despite this, our union and our workers are in a fight for their very existence. And I'm very glad to be here. If anyone has any questions, I'm more than glad to assist. I'm certain that Mr. Shriver and Congressman Vindman, this will be a very valuable forum. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, both. I'm going to get to our first question in a minute, but as to the point about this new legislation that I introduced today. So this is week 3 on the job. I introduced my first piece of legislation today, and it's the Supporting Military Families Act. And what it does is for at least, and you can't defeat everything all at once. Sometimes you got to take small steps. So this is a bipartisan bill. This actually protects active duty service member spouses and at least allows them to continue to work remotely. This is directly in response to a request from a constituent. She lives 100 miles outside of DC in the 7th Congressional District, which I represent. And the return to work order, very broad, very unclear, chaotic, potentially would have brought her back in. And so this is meant to address that issue. We have more legislation that we're going to plan to move forward, but we're taking aggressive action right now. With that, first question is, what happens if someone accepts the deferred resignation and it is later found to be unlawful? And so, Rob, I'm going to kick it over to you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think first of all, if you accept the deferred resignation, you stay on the books in a paid status, is what they're saying. So if they live up to that, you're going to stay on the books. You're going to get your pay every 2 weeks, just like you do now. If it's ultimately deemed invalid, I don't I have to speculate, but I don't really see a situation where the court would go back and somehow hold the employee responsible and they create some kind of consequence for any employee who accepted that. It's basically you're treated like you're in a pay status. So I don't think you have to worry that if it's declared illegal, that it'll come back to get you in some way.
Yeah, so I think the real issue here is that you have to trust that this fork in the road letter that is not authorized in any law. So it's not there's no appropriation for it, that they're actually going to follow through on it. And the history here is that Musk did the same thing. They didn't even change the name of this program. It's called Fork of the Road when he did this at one of his previous companies. And as soon as people accepted it, they treated it as a resignation, and then they terminated them. And so they didn't follow through. They didn't continue to pay them for whatever period of time here. And here it's going to be through the end of the fiscal year. So you have to trust Elon Musk and the administration to follow through. That's the first issue, I'd say, or the main issue, I'd say. Scott, anything to add to this?
Only that I strongly discourage any federal worker from taking the offer at face value, and that the AFG's current advice is to not respond to the offer at this time. However, as Mr. Schreiber said, it is completely up to the employee, and they have to do what they feel is in their best interest.
And Congressman, if you don't mind, I'd like to add just one more thing is, so we've started to see some of the fine print, right? They've started to send out some of these, what these agreements look like. There's a very broad waiver of your rights in those agreements. And I'm not purporting to provide legal advice here or anything like that, but that's something that caught my eye, that basically any kind of claim that you might bring against the agency for anything, possibly even for violating this very agreement they're asking you to sign, you're waiving your right to do that. And that's something that, like I said, I raised an eyebrow.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, question number 2. We were told that there is a possible RIF, reduction in force, coming in the next 1 to 2 months. What have you heard on this topic? So obviously there are lots of rumors flying around. I've heard several of them. I would suggest to you that if you're getting documentation, our office would be very much interested in seeing that as well. If you're a constituent, we have constituent services. We will open a case and we will try to work that case to conclusion, successful conclusion for you. Part of that is you engaging with my team so we can track what the situation is here. Look, you're on here tonight because you're civil servants who want to do your jobs, continue serving your country, and you didn't sign up for this level of uncertainty and fear. You frankly don't deserve it. What I would say with so many rumors flying is just hold tight. They want you to quit. The administration is deliberately creating uncertainty because they want you to leave. And ultimately, like Rob said, sign a waiver, sign away all of your rights. So, gentlemen, I'll start with Scott first. Anything to add?
No, not this time. Thank you.
Rob?
I would just add that I agree you didn't sign up for this, and that what federal civil servants do is what Congress tells them to do, what their political leadership tells them to do. And then for a new team to come in and say, well, we don't like that you did that, and not just like shift priorities, because you guys are used to that, right? New team comes in, there's new priorities. That's part of the game. That's just part of the deal. And then you work hard on those priorities. That's what I've experienced with civil service throughout my entire career. So you're right. You didn't sign up for this. It's not supposed to be this way. And just know that people like Scott and his organization, AFGE, my organization, Democracy Forward, Congressman Vindman here, we're all fighting for you in all the different forums we can.
Thank you for that. Okay, just so everybody's tracking, I have 57 questions in the queue, so I'm not sure we're going to get to all of them, but we are looking to group them together if they're similar, and we're going to answer as many questions as we can in the next 40 minutes. Question number 3. New deferred resignation agreements were issued tonight. Have you seen these? Are they valid legal offers? We've been granted only 1 day of review. So I have not seen the latest version. I'd love it if somebody can drop it in the chat or share it with us so we can also get a copy of that and have a better understanding of it. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to give you an analysis on the fly. But just like the previous offer, I mean, a valid offer normally has certain criteria. It's signed by like the agency head. It has it's on letterhead. It's not an email. If there's a payout amount, it's actually listed in there. There are details. And so I guess I would say I don't know that anybody else is going to have anything else to add. Rob, this is coming fast and furious. Have you seen this new offer?
I'm not sure if it's the same one that I've seen from other agencies. It may just be that agencies are rolling out these templates. Um, that's why that's why we, along with AFGE and other unions, have filed a lawsuit because it's not right to give you the fine print the night before that you have to figure this out. So we were in court. We're in court tomorrow asking the court to pause this deadline and send OPM back to get everybody the information they need to evaluate whether this is a real deal or not.
Scott?
Coming off mute. I think Mr. Shriver did an excellent answer, gave an excellent answer to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, question number 4. Thank you for drafting the bipartisan bill protecting military spouses and families. Is there a timeline for this to go to the floor for voting and be placed into law? My organization has stated that all other directives protecting military spouses telework should and do not need to be followed. So look, this bill is a bipartisan piece of legislation. It is very narrowly focused on this particular issue. There will be more legislation coming to protect different classes of people, but I wanted to take quick action on topics that frankly would get as much bipartisan support and have the administration start to roll back some of their egregious activities. My hope is that something like this, it's named Supporting Military Families Act, is going to make it hard for people not to vote in favor of it. There obviously will be people that will not vote for it, but the vast majority, if we can get 2/3 of Congress to agree, and you know how hard that could be these days, it can go through a fast track. And if it goes through the fast track, then it can get signed into law pretty rapidly. We're going to be working that over the course of the next days and weeks. But there's a whole legislative process. If you want to know how that process works, I think School of Rock has a video on it. But just go, it has to actually get voted on by the floor, by all the members. Then it has to go to the Senate and to the president. So some of that can take a long time. But in a bill like this, I have fairly high hopes.
And Congressman, I
Sure.
will just say to the folks in the chat, I see a few people raising their hands and then taking their hands down. If you'd like the opportunity to speak, just raise your hand. And after this next question, we'll take some voice questions or just stories.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Amanda. Actually, right now, we, unless Rob or Scott, you have anything to say about the legislation that I introduced, I suspect no. We can go to a question from the live audience.
Great. I have someone here, not sure if they want to be named, so I'll keep their name silent right now and I'll allow them to talk.
Oh, hello. By the way, the chat has been disabled, but thank you all for your help. I'm a federal employee, I'm a military spouse. Can you comment on, if there's a reduction in force at some of these agencies, where I work, we don't know that. Will your legislation cover a future reduction in force, or is this really about remote telework policy? Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, so this legislation is very narrowly focused on this, the return to work, in-person work. It does not cover RIF or things like that. So again, it was focused on the president's executive order directing that all federal employees return to work, and meant to address that. Okay, let's see. I have question number 5. Will these lawsuits cover all of us, or do we have to file individually, especially for the additional data breach and for whatever happens after tomorrow's deadline? So that's a great question, actually, I think right in your wheelhouse, Rob.
Yeah. So again, I'm not really in a position to give out any legal advice, so don't take it this way. Let me just say this, that There are lawsuits that are filed that challenge the underlying legality of certain actions. And if those lawsuits are successful, then people who are harmed by that are the ones they get a remedy, whether you were like a named party in the lawsuit. Like if, for example, if the judge decides tomorrow that federal employees need more time and more information on this fork in the road email, then all federal employees are going to get more time and more information. You don't have to be, specifically part of the lawsuit to get that. But the thing that I want to make sure you're all thinking about is if the agencies take personnel actions against you, whether it's like removing you or conducting a reduction in force or things like that, you'll get a notice that will tell you you have a certain amount of time to file an appeal with the Merit System Protection Board. It's really important to pay attention to that deadline because you have a lot of rights in these processes. Agencies don't do RIFs too well. Under the best of circumstances, they're complicated, they mess them up. So you want to make sure that you're not missing that deadline and that you are getting your own counsel, talking to your union. If you're in a bargaining unit, first and foremost, talk to your union rep. If you're not, get your own counsel, or even if you can't do that, you can go on civilservicestrong.org. We have some resources there that can help folks navigate that process. It's not too hard to file your own appeal.
Thanks. And I would say, in addition to that, if you have not all sort of gone onto our website or on our mailing list, obviously we want to continue to communicate with you. I encourage you to get on our mailing list. We'll communicate with you about this topic and others. And I think we have some more folks in the audio queue. Amanda, let's go to the audio.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier at the start of the meeting that the agencies have other options like offering VERAs. Well, the information that recently came out, at least from HHS, basically says they have approved VERAs. And there are people that are close to retirement who may not meet the age qualification, but have like over 25 years, who would actually consider taking this offer under the deferred resignation program with a VERA because it ensures that they will get their retirement, and that's what they would want to do. So in comparison to have to work 4 years under administration, that will probably be horrible working conditions. Some people will elect to take that. Is that safe to do? Because now that they've offered that, VERA is something that the agencies do offer. And now that they've sweetened the pot with the VERA, there are going to be people that want to take this opportunity because we're not sure if it's going to be offered again.
So the agencies are going to continue to take sort of routine actions or even non-routine actions like early retirement. The difficulty, obviously, in this environment is telling what's real and what's fake. Rob, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say it's about time they started to look at the programs that exist that are authorized by Congress and implemented by OPM regulations. Again, it's a very personal decision for every federal employee, and everything that you just mentioned is totally valid as far as considerations. I guess what I would say again is you got to read the fine print. They're saying that it's VERA. Is it really VERA? Is it in line with the regulations? I talked to another employee who was very uncomfortable with the scope of the waiver of rights that they needed to sign in order to get the VERA. So there's just a lot of detail to think through, and it's a personal decision. And read the fine print and find as much information as you can about what's going on by going to places like civilservicestrong.org, reaching out through the congressman, your local union. Just make sure that you understand what you're signing up for.
Scott, anything to add on that?
I agree again with Mr. Shriver. It is absolutely a very personal decision. The rules should be routine, but I think what we're seeing recently is that the rules seem to be seen as malleable. So I would absolutely speak with your local union representative to ensure that whatever advice you're getting is, even if the program is kind of overarching the government, you want to get something that's maybe possibly agency specific to your situation, so that you can again make the absolute best choice for you and your family.
Thank you, Scott. We'll go for one more audio question and then we'll go back to some of the Q&A.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for hosting this. It's really appreciated. I am concerned now about probationary individuals that seem to have been targeted. We don't know much of how probationary personnel are going to be targeted. For me specifically, I started out at an agency, worked for 6 years, and then moved on to another one. I will hit my non-probation, I will no longer be probationary February 25th. We aren't getting any communication from leadership because leadership is not getting any clear answers to be able to funnel down to personnel. So my question is, for those probationary individuals who are now hearing that they could potentially be on the chopping block, has no clue, the deadline's tomorrow night, we don't know what's real, what's not real. What is your thoughts on how personnel should navigate this? Because we want to be able to trust our leadership that they're giving us all the information, and that if we're told that we put in that everybody's critical, we need to keep all of our probationary billets because they're all critical. But then the powers that be come back and say, well, that's great, but now you need to cut 10%. It's just such a fluid environment that navigating this is difficult. Do you have thoughts on that for specifically probationary and this offer? Thank you.
Look, I think there are a couple of, there are some additional facts that I think are necessary, like, because there have been carve-outs for certain agencies. Like if you're in one of the defense agencies, even though those are not all immune, I think that the DoD has or certain elements in DoD have been exempted from this. So it really, I have a question about what agency you work with. Obviously, if you could make it to the non-probationary time period for you specifically, that's less than a month from now. I mean, that would be optimal. And it's hard to say how fast they will move. In USAID, obviously, they've moved very, very fast. But other departments and agencies, they have not moved that fast yet. So these are just kind of some of my initial thoughts. I don't know that I have a much better answer to that. But how about Scott? I'll let you start first.
I mean, it's absolutely a concern, and it almost in a sense it's kind of the low hanging fruit I think they're going for. But what I think would be the best thing to do is, again, there are a lot of rumors going around. There is a lot of I think misinformation going around. I think it is intended to frighten federal employees. I think the best thing to do is in your work group or at your facility to reach out to your union representative and speak to them about whether your agency is exempt from that requirement as far as the probationary employees, as well as get advice on what to do specific to your situation. Thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, let me just add a thought or two to that. First, it it's tough, right? Because the probationary folks are the most vulnerable, given that until you complete your probationary period, you don't have those adverse action rates. So it's a scary place to be. They mean for it to be scary by, collecting these lists and making everybody wonder what's going to happen. I can tell you that your career leaders don't know what's going to happen. Like they're not being let in on the strategy. And it's killing them, from the ones I'm talking to, it's killing them that they can't give you the answers that you're looking for and they're not in on what's going on. So it's tough. Now, let me just say that just because you're probationary doesn't mean you got no rights. They still can't discriminate against you. They can't take action based on, partisan politics. They can't retaliate against you if you're a whistleblower. There are some protections there. And look, the community knows that probationary folks are particularly vulnerable and trying to figure out how best to support you as you go through whatever's left to come. I don't envy you guys this decision um, because you are so vulnerable, but once again, like there's just a lot of fishiness to these offers that make me really skeptical of them.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, question number 7 in the chat. Outside of the military spouses legislation you introduced, what are other steps you're considering to help provide stability for the federal workforce employees who live in Virginia? So I've sponsored something called the Saving Civil Service Act, which would put a stop to Trump's Schedule F. I also co-sponsored the Cost of Relocations Act, which would ensure that before any relocation of agency headquarters occurs, that cost benefits analysis occurs. Why I did this because these relocations will never prove beneficial and will always cost extra taxpayer dollars. I mean, these are not government efficiency matters. Actually, I like to call it Department of Government inefficiency, if anything. Not to mention, we'll have countless vacancies to fill that won't get filled. Again, the administration's whole idea. So ultimately, we're going to need to be nimble no matter what they throw at us. We're going to hold them accountable. And, I am in the Democratic caucus. We're in the minority. Unfortunately, we do have a partisan environment on Capitol Hill. And so there's only so much we can do in the minority. We're going to fight real hard. We're going to have opportunities actually in coming weeks. There are going to be certain pieces of legislation that are going to require Democratic support to pass. And so we're going to take those opportunities to fight for employees. But the environment is not that easy because the Republican Party has the trifecta, and so they control really all the levers of power. Okay, and I'll leave it at that. Question number 8. Thanks so much for holding this town hall and standing up for us. It seems to me that a lot of the root issues here are that the general population doesn't value or understand the work that federal workers do. I'm hearing a lot of just go to the private sector. How can we help the general population understand the value of government workers and the services they provide? Unfortunately, I think for certain parts of the country, that's true. I will tell you, in the 7th Congressional District, the area that I represent, I have 3 military installations. 15% of the district is federal government employees. Another 6% are contractors. So we're talking, north of 50 or 60,000 people at least that are in the federal government. And then the military folks that come on top of that. So huge swath of the district. I can in Northern Virginia, in the district I represent, people know the value of federal government employees because that's your friends and neighbors. Those are the people that you interact with on a daily basis. They're hardworking individuals that are serving the American public. That's true throughout Virginia and Maryland and DC, so the entire DMV. There are other places where that may not be true. And so I think getting the message out, which we've tried to do when we were out at USAID headquarters a few days ago and then Treasury yesterday. And unfortunately, I think people are going to understand the value of federal workers when they start to suffer the negative consequences for not seeing federal workers. Whether it's folks that are involved in the security sector, national security, or providing services. When they're impacted directly, that's when they'll start to see the value of federal servants, civil servants. So it's a shame. We're highlighting the great work that civil servants do on a daily basis. And that's my 2 cents. I'm going to pass it to the other two gentlemen. I'm sure they have some comments on this as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in and say I agree this is a challenge. And I think later down in the Q&A, somebody mentioned the Park Service and whether there's going to be sufficient staffing to open up the national parks when the weather gets better. That's just one example. There's other examples. When we go to the grocery store and we buy chicken or meat there, we want to make sure that that meat was inspected by somebody who was hired because they know what they're doing and not just because of who they voted for. Or when we apply for a small business loan, we want that application to be considered on its merits and not based on who we donated to in a political campaign. And then when we're afraid for our lives and our homes because there are wildland firefighters, we want decisions about how those federal resources are deployed to be based on the science, the weather, and the data and the evidence, and not on the political leanings of our neighborhood. And that's why a nonpartisan civil service is so critical. And if you take away all of the experts that do this stuff, like what if every employee in a small USDA office in Iowa takes this deferred resignation? Like, who are those farmers going to go to when they need some help? What if a whole bunch of people from the Social Security Administration take these offers and people's benefits checks are slowed down? Those are the kinds of impacts that federal employees have every day, and why they're so necessary for our economy.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. I think the perception, it may be regional. However, I think it speaks to the efficiency and the commitment of our federal workers that the work that they do is considered so routine and expected that people often overlook the extraordinary efforts our federal workers make each and every day.
Thanks, gentlemen. Okay, I think we're going to do another one of these before we flip over to audio. So, is there a way to force the executive branch to follow the correct RIF procedures so that any reduction in force is done in a considered manner and the mission of the agency, in our case, the FAA, obviously we've seen last week how important the work of the FAA is able to be performed. And so, yes and no. They need to follow a law, but so far we've seen a lot of lawlessness. Courts are critical, but can be slow. There will be a lot of lawsuits. Hopefully courts will issue quick injunctions, especially when it affects the safety of the American people. In the meantime, we just need to hold them to account by having these public conversations, making your voice heard, contact your members, contacting the White House public comment line, departments and agency heads. But Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. I don't know if, Rob, do you have?
I'll just add that there's a system set up through the Merit System Protection Board for people affected by RIFs to file appeals, and you have a right to make sure that that process is run right. And so that's what those processes exist for. If you're in a bargaining unit, your union reps can help you either navigate that or the remedies you have through your collective bargaining agreement. But even folks not in a bargaining unit still have these appeal rights to the MSPB.
And I absolutely echo what Rob just said. Um, the processes may vary based upon the I guess your master agreement or your collective bargaining agreement somewhat. However, you should absolutely confer with your union rep if you have one if you're a member of a bargaining unit, and see what your options are towards fighting it if necessary.
Congressman, I believe you're on mute.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, let's go to audio.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity to talk to you guys. I'm a retired medevac pilot and with the Army, and I'm 100% permanent and total disabled. I bought my time back because why not? And have been working for a federal agency for the last 10 years. I also am the father of a child with autism who's an adult and will never be able to take care of herself, who I'm the sole caregiver for. If this opportunity, as unclear as it is a legitimate opportunity for voluntary early retirement, being that I'm over 25 years, I'd like to take it. I have heard you guys say that it's a personal decision, and I agree. The only thing holding me back from making this decision is I understand it's different than RIFs and VERAs have been done in the past. But is it so different that it can't be trusted? OPM grants the authority, the agency implements. That's my understanding of the law. Granted, it's not being done the way we've traditionally seen it, but I'd love to hear the argument beyond what we've talked about, why it can't be trusted. And thanks again for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for your service, both in uniform and afterwards. Look, if it's a legitimate early retirement program, then obviously it would be treated like any other. The problem, you're going to need to determine whether it's legitimate or not, and I think you do that by talking to your union rep. This is a big, major financial decision. You probably talk to an attorney to confirm that if it's legitimate. If it's legitimate, then you can hold the government to it. You know, it's a contract, it's an agreement, right? And you can go to the different entities to enforce that. Obviously, there's some issues with some of these entities, like the senior board members have been depopulated, so they don't have quorum, so they're not actually functioning. So you have like limited recourse in this regard, I think, with the MSPB for one. But yeah, Rob, anything to add?
I would just say that, like, I totally hear you, and I get that perspective 100%. And that's why we think it's important for this to go back to OPM and them to answer these questions and give people time with the real information. You know, I think they came around to this Vera idea pretty late in the day, and I still have questions about how the Vera intersects with the deferred resignation. So, you know, I'm hopeful that the court's going to intervene and give everybody more time and make OPM put better information out. But if they don't, I go back to what I said before, which is that just read the fine print and get some help if you need some help to understand the fine print, because there's some stuff there that again was pretty broad as far as waiving rights and whatnot. And so I guess one of my questions would be if you signed up and did this because you thought the Vera was legit and then they messed it up, have you waived your rights to hold them accountable for that deal? That's kind of the lingering question that I've got about it.
Scott?
Again, I concur with Mr. Shriver. I think that there's not really enough information at this time to give advice or definitive advice. So I defer to Mr. Shriver.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. In normal circumstances, you have, you know, you have, several weeks, a month or so to accept these early separation or early retirement incentives. These, to me, some of the indicia about whether it's legitimate or not, if they tell you you got, 48 hours, take it or leave it, that does not sound like a legitimate government action. Nothing that I've seen before. But if it has, the amounts and it cites to authority for one thing, you want a document that cites to the authority that allows them to do this, like any other normal document would have historically, that gives you the time to fully consider it. That's a tough decision to make in 24 or 48 hours. But, normally you get 30 days. If it's missing some of that, then I would be really, really careful about it. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I think there's one more audio in the queue, and then we're going to go to a couple of questions. And I think we have just about 10 minutes left. Let's see if we can make these pretty quick. Answer as many as possible.
Hello, sir. Less a question than a prompt for you. You mentioned that you are in the minority and understand the handcuffs you're on. I'd just like to request that you get on every single show, every media outlet as possible, blast this wide, because people really don't understand. It's not a left or a right issue. It is us, and no one understands what's happening, especially if they're following their silos. So understand you can't do much legislatively. That's just reality. But the more you get out there, the more you get in front of the entire population, go on Fox News, hit these people and do it hard. And that's all I ask. So thank you.
Yes, sir. And look, without going too far afield from the labor and employment issues that we're talking about now, I mean, think about the freeze on the aids and grants that occurred last week. That's sort of temporarily on hold, but not really. And I don't want to get too much into it, but I was speaking to the farmers. I had a room full of farmers last week in Culpeper, and they were concerned about USDA grants. They had partially constructed, poultry house, and they weren't sure if they were going to get the funding to finish the construction, crop insurance and things like that. So there's a whole raft of issues and chaos that's being caused. And I got what you're saying. I'm going to do the best I can. The other members of my caucus, everybody of good conscience is going to do the same. And we're going to get out there and fight for you. Okay, let's go to question 10 here is, what will be done to protect civil servants who have been placed on leave for DEI work? Rob, quick hit on this one.
Yeah, I think the devil's in the details. I think if they conduct a reduction in force, there's going to be a lot of questions about who should be included within that, and that you should consult with your union because you'll have potentially rights under the union contract or through an MSPB appeal.
Great. Scott, for you, for employees who can't join a union because of their position or agency, can the union still help?
Unofficially. I believe that a union representative, our primary goal is to serve our members, to serve our bargaining unit. However, being familiar with policy and processes, a union representative could conceivably offer advice and maybe counsel to a non-bargaining unit employee. However, that would be up to the specific local or even the specific union representative. It depends on how it works in your facility.
Great. What's being done to protect the rights of temp term employees and other Schedule F employees? Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that, again, partnering with AFGE, AFSCME, some other unions, we've filed a couple lawsuits against the expanded Schedule F. I know the union that I worked for at the very beginning of my career, NTU, has also filed litigation. So there's a lot of litigation over the expanded Schedule F. The temp term employees, again, it kind of is a little bit on a case by case basis. So if you're in that category, I would say, and you're subject to an adverse personnel action, consulting with your union or legal counsel on your rights would be appropriate.
Scott?
I agree.
Okay, so look, I'll give each of you gentlemen 30 seconds to wrap it up. I'll have some closing comments, but thank you so much, everybody, for joining. We had over 400 participants in this town hall, the first of many, I'm sure. I want to thank the panelists for your time and expertise. Scott?
Just as far as the executive orders that are coming out, a lot of the actions coming out of the administration, I believe it is definitely an attempt to transform a professional civil service into an army of political appointees who are loyal to a specific party. If it dismantles a merit-based civil service, so rather than being based on merit, we're looking at party loyalty or loyalty to a specific person. So it would definitely jeopardize professionalism and impartiality. It would hurt the efficiency of the government, and it would, I think, lead to a vast reduction in the number of federal employees as well as the efficiency of the government. I encourage you, Congressman Vindman, and each person on this call to do as the one gentleman said, reach out to the media and make as much noise as you can to fight this. The administration has many venues to reach their people, and the union is we need to stand up and take it to the people.
Thank you, Scott. Rob?
I want to thank all the feds on the call tonight for their service. I had the honor to be a real champion of federal employees in my time as the OPM acting director. We're committed to continuing to championing you for what you do every day, delivering for the American people. When they hurt you, they hurt the country. And that's what the country is going to see. They're going to see how important federal employees are to the economy, how federal employees contribute every day in ways that are critical to every person in the country. I want you to hear that we know what you're doing. We know that you have chosen this career because you're dedicated to the mission, you're dedicated to serving the American people, and that service should be honored and not demeaned. So just know that we see you, we got your back, and we're fighting for you. And I really appreciate, Congressman, that you're fighting for federal employees and that you brought us together all tonight to talk about these important issues.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're right at time, so let me just say to all the federal employees on here, I hear you, I see you. You're my friends and neighbors. I interact with you on a daily basis. In fact, I'm married to one of you. Look, I'm going to fight for you. I know the critical work that you do. Scott talked about and Rob talked about all the detrimental things that people are likely to see. But I also fear for our national security. I think that's a major factor. That expertise and the dedication that you bring, the knowledge that you bring, is what keeps this country safe. And my fear is that by attacking you and eliminating hardworking civil servants, this country is less safe. So I ask you to hang on as long as possible. You all have your own individual decisions to make. Hang on as long as possible. Your service is necessary and critical. You may not be hearing it from some folks in senior leadership and billionaires, but you know, your friends and neighbors and folks like me value what you've done. So thank you. Have a good night. And please sign on to my newsletter so I can keep you informed. Have a good night.